So if we think of skylines as ensembles of dreams realized,
Hmm.
you spent quite a bit of time in New York. What do you love about and what do you think about the New York City skyline? What's a good picture? We're looking here at a few. I mean, looking over the
Yeah.
water.
Well, I think the water is an unbelievable feature of the New York skyline. As you see the island on approach, and oftentimes you'll see, like in these images, you'll see these towers reflecting off of the water surface. So I think there's something very beautiful and unique about that. When I look at New York, I see this unbelievable sort of tapestry of different types of architecture. So you have the Gothic form as represented by buildings like the Woolworth Building, or you'll have Art Deco as represented by buildings like 40 Wall Street, or the Chrysler Building, or Rockefeller Center. And then you'll have these unbelievable super modern examples or modernist examples like Lever House and Seagram's House. So you have all of these different styles. And I think to build in New York, you're really building the best of the best. So nobody's giving New York their sort of second rate work. And especially when a lot of those buildings were built, there was this incredible competition happening between New York and Chicago for kind of dominance of the sky
Mhm.
and for who could create the greatest skyline, this sort of race to the sky when skyscrapers were first being built, starting in Chicago and then New York surpassing that in terms of height, at least, with the Empire State Building. So I love sort of contextualizing the skylines as well and thinking back to when different components that are so iconic were added and the context in which they came into being.
I got to ask you about this. There's a pretty cool page that I've been following on X, Architecture and Tradition, and they celebrate sort of traditional schools of architecture. And you mentioned Gothic, the tapestry. This is
Yeah.
in Chicago, the Tribune Tower in Chicago. So what do you think about that? Sort of the old and the new mixed together. Do you like Gothic?
I think it's hard to look at something like the Tribune Tower and not be completely in awe. Like, this is an unbelievable building. Look at those buttresses, and you've got gargoyles hanging off of it.
Yeah.
And, this style was reminiscent of the cathedrals of Europe, which was very kind of in vogue in like the 1920s here in America. Actually, I mentioned the Woolworth Tower before. The Woolworth Tower was actually referred to as the Cathedral of Commerce. And because it also was in that Gothic style.
Amazing.
So this was built maybe a decade before the Tribune building. But the Tribune building to me is it's almost not replicable. It personally really resonates with me because one of the first projects I ever worked on was building Trump Chicago, which was this beautiful, elegant, super modern, all glass skyscraper right across the way. So it was right across the river. So I would look out the windows as it was under construction, or be standing quite literally on rebar of the building, looking out at the Tribune, and incredibly inspired. And now the reflective glass of the building reflects back not only the river, but also um, the Tribune building and other buildings on Michigan Avenue.
Do you like it when the reflective properties of the glass is part of the architecture?
I think it depends. Like, they have super reflective glass that sometimes doesn't work. It's distracting, and I think it's one component of sort of a composition that comes together. I think in this case, the glass on Trump Chicago is very beautiful. It was designed by Adrian Smith of Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, a major architecture firm, who actually did the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, which is, I think, like an awe-inspiring example of modern architecture. But glass is tricky. You have to get the shade right. Some glass has a lot of iron in it and gets super green. And that's a choice. And sometimes you have more blue properties, blue silver, like you see here. But it's part of the character.
How do you know what it's actually going to look like when it's done? Like, is it possible to imagine that? Because it feels like there's so many variables.
I think so. I think if you have a vivid imagination, and if you
Yeah.
sit with it, and then if you also go beyond the rendering, right? You have to live with the materials. So you don't build a 92-story building, glass curtain wall, and not deeply examine the actual curtain wall before purchasing it. So you have to spend a lot of time with the actual materials, not just the beautiful sort of artistic renderings, which can be incredibly misleading. The goal is actually that the end result is much, much more compelling than what the architect or artist rendered. But oftentimes that's very much not the case. Sometimes also you mentioned context, sometimes I'll see renderings of buildings. I'm like, wait, what about the building right to the left of it that's blocking 80% of its views of the, architects, they'll remove things that are inconvenient. So you have to be rooted
In reality.
in reality. Exactly.
And I love the notion of living with the materials in contrast to
Yeah.
living in the imagined world of the drawings.
Yeah.
And so the both are probably important because you have to dream the thing into existence, but you also have to be rooted in like what the thing is actually going to look like in the context of everything else.
100%.